So then we are back with more information regarding the renewed covenant from the Aramaic New English translation, and there is also another important topic regarding prophecies. Is prophecy important these days? Person can certainly understand, and it is very important these days. But there are at least a couple of levels of prophecies as we understand. There are the prophecies given, those from the prophets of old. Those are solid understandings from the instructions and the prophets. And then there are prophecies that are given through then the function of the prophecy through the set apart Hebrews. Those are another type of prophecy. So then obviously we begin to understand, when we have the understanding from the times of old of the prophecies given by the prophets, we have those in mind. And then when we visit at the gate of the camps of the Hebrews, then prophecy is also given relating to the present situation. We understand, for instance, political understandings from the world. We understand the economical situation of the world, and then those Hebrews in their camps, they have prophecies regarding the political understanding of the present moment. So this is the second level of the prophecies. So those are related with existing present situations. Let's say, for instance, there is a situation of a country coming for help at the gate of the Hebrews. Then there are prophecies related with this specific country. There are areas where they prophesied over. Did not Agabus prophesy that it would have a famine during the time of Shaul? Read the Acts. If you are not familiar with prophecies, then you should be acquainted with them. Agabus did predict, and he prophesied that would come a famine, and he did. It truly did come a famine. So then we understand when the functions of Ruach HaKodesh, obviously through the Hebrews, then they are functioning in the function of prophecy. There are then pertinent information from heaven relating to the existing situation of the world. They prophesy over countries, they prophesy over the people, situations, circumstances, economy. Each and every one of them in the name of Yahweh, the true Creator. Or thus says Yahweh. But we ourselves, Gentiles, we don't do this. We simply receive from the set-apart Hebrews words from heaven, and they can be through words of wisdom, words of knowledge, healing, miracles, tongues, interpretation of tongues, and then miracles, and then discerning of spirits. And obviously then regarding the one of them is prophecy, then we understand that the prophecy then is related with the existing situation in the world, not the great prophecies from the time of old. Those are set in place. What had to be said regarding the world's prophecies, those were closed already from the time of then Bereshit up to Revelation. The world's line of understandings and then prophetic timelines of events, those are completed. Those they remain as they are. However, there are prophecies pertinent to each country, political, economical, and at times personal. So it truly depends upon what then Ruach HaKodesh has in mind. So those are very important. That's why we must encourage the saved Hebrew brothers, those wealthy people, to make sure they buy farmlands so then they can set up camps. Why then farmlands? Because they delineate the shadow understanding from the prophetic of the promised land. Then it's delineated, the promised land. This is the Holy Land, set up holy lands around the world. The Gentiles, they service the land for them, while they themselves are engaged in being obedient to the Torah 100% and the prophets and the writings. And then they function in Ruach HaKodesh for the benefit of the Gentiles while being serviced by them, being provisioned by them. So then Isaiah, the 61st chapter, then comes to place. What he meant, then strangers would come and then they would serve you. And then there is a mistake in the translation of Isaiah. They say then they would boast in the Gentiles. No, they don't boast in the Gentiles. They boast in Yahweh, the true Creator. The proper translation was they would have joy then doing the work of Yahweh. They would boast in Him, not on the Gentiles. The translation was wrong. The translator, when he was translating the words, they were so used to be boasting on other people because, oh, how special they are. It's not boasting upon the Gentiles. They are boasting upon Yahweh for being the true Creator and doing the marvelous work. They simply receive the services from the Gentiles, but the boasting is done in Yahweh, the true Creator, for the marvelous works He's performing. He's saving the Gentiles, and His words then is going through the Gentiles and producing works of justice and returning completed. The boasting is in the joy of having the words of the Creator completed, the return completed. They are not going to be playing around and being on the back of the Gentiles. Forget it, the translation is wrong. They are going to boast in Yahweh for being the great Creator. So then when you read Isaiah the 61st chapter, they will then boast. They will then boast in Yahweh. And then the Gentiles, they are going to have their part. They are going to be faithful. And then the joy of the camp then obviously then is strengthened by the words coming back completed. So then other areas regarding then the land of Israel, we understand that in the future the pagans in the land, they are going to be converted. But it's not going to start in Israel, it's going to start in the camps. That's the point, because the last standing order was for them to go around the world forming holy lands. So they would practice the second service. That's why we have then the Megillah of the Hebrews. The Megillah of the Hebrews states the updates of the second service. So then the people, the Gentiles, then they would be serviced. They would receive words from heaven. During the time of the first service, it was rare, very rare, for a person to receive words from Yahweh. It was given mostly to nations and people. Sometimes representatives of nations would receive at times words from the Creator. Individuals, regular workers, not even as a dream having words from heaven. That's why representatives from many nations would come to the presence of Shimon or Solomon. They were representing nations. They would implement in their governments the understanding of the Creator. So then part of their governments would have then the understandings from the Creator's government. So they would then return to their countries and they would implement what they've learned. But when Shavuot came and then Ruach HaKodesh started then the functions of Ruach HaKodesh, then the people also were granted this great and marvelous presence of Yahweh, the true Elohim, in a personal basis. So what then was the first service only given to nations and representatives of nations became a great understanding, because then each person, they have also words from the Creator. So it started then making more sense. So then prophecies are very important. But the point is, the Gentiles, they have their tasks, and then the set-apart people much higher tasks. They must remain faithful also when they are amongst the Gentiles. Because understand, when they are involved with an anointing, then the set-apart people, they sense the level of faith of the Gentiles, because it is spiritual. They detect the problems, they detect situations, and then they warn them. There is this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. So then they themselves, if they have to repent, they pray, and they move on. They are faithful. And then the set apart, they return to the camp. Because when the set apart people, they remain a long time outside of the camp without the order from Ruach HaKodesh, they get worn out. If you take a telephone with a certain distance using frequency, and then the instructions states only go 200 yards. If you go beyond 200, at some point you don't have the information coming in anymore. This is what it means when the set apart people, they are away from their camps. They begin to falter. So they are prepared in the camp to do a task. They go amongst the Gentiles, they do the task, and then they return. This is what it means to be set apart. They must be always being refreshed in the camps. Because the work is very demanding. They must then shepherd the people. 7 functions must be exercised amongst them. And they have then to teach them also, each person tailor-made from the instructor in heaven. He himself does the work through them. And then the Gentiles, they resume their work. Those that are servicing the land, they service the land, they return to their duties. And then representatives from countries, when they come, they also receive words, and then can be any of the 7 functions. So it shows you the importance of having the camps set up. But then the saved Hebrew brothers, they must take initiative. Because they are not going to be saved if they are not in their camps. They are lost. They are in sin. First, because set apart, they were never to be mixed with the world's trade. So if they are mixed in the world's trade, then they are in sin. They are not going to be saved. They are only saved when they are in their camps. The last standing order from Yahweh Yeshua was for them to go around the world and then form holy lands, as they were taught from Moses. Then they function They function in Ruach HaKodesh for the benefit of the Gentiles. But they themselves, the Hebrews, they are then set apart. So then when we read the 20th chapter of Revelation, verse 9, we understand the set apart camps and the beloved city. In the 20th chapter of Revelation, already the city of Jerusalem is rebuilt, temple rebuilt, and they are in the last part of the vengeance. So if we then understand the prior of means the Hebrews must return to their camps. From the Creator, thou shalt not steal. When the Hebrews are involved with the Gentiles' trade, they are stealing. They are not to be doing so. They are to be in their camps, being loyal to the covenant and the Torah and the instructions and the prophets and the writings. So then the Gentiles, they receive the 7 functions through them. And then the Gentiles, they congregate, but they don't have leaders over them. No pastors, no teachers, no evangelists, no prophets of their own. There is a price to be paid amongst the Gentiles when they understand what it means to be in the faith. And also, from the time that we understand from the part of the Hebrews, they also have a price to be paid. They don't mix themselves with the trades of the world. So each depending of each other. And then we understand from Deuteronomy the great favors of Yahweh regarding the land. When they came to the promised land, they were given the favors versus the curses. Those were related only to the land of Israel. Only. And then the extension of those laws were then extended in places then they would go around the world forming holy lands. Then those holy lands would have the understanding of the favor from the Creator. Your kneading bowl would be then plentiful. The animals would be then procreating. You would have then abundance. And then the crops. Those are extended favors from the Creator regarding only the holy lands around the world. Truly, when these preachers, they begin to preach what they don't understand, and then they begin to say, oh, if you are obedient, then your land is going to be prosperous, and then your animals are going to be prosperous. No, that's a lie. Those are related only to the places where they would set up holy lands. There is no link from outside of the camp relating with the biblical laws. The Creator has His own laws, He has His own language, He has His own principles. And He wants His people to be then abiding with those principles, laws, and statutes and judgments, including the land. And then Yahshua said, whatsoever Moses told you to do. What does it mean, whatsoever? Each and every law taught by Moses, those must be done and observed. So when they would go around the world forming holy lands, then would come the obedience and observance of those laws, including the land's laws. The favor of the land, it's not going to be extended outside of the camps. In terms of the camp as the perimeter of the service area, providing them with provisions. Because the reason why there is a land around the camp is to service them. So then the principles of the land where they are in to service the camps, it's only for them. It doesn't extend outside of the perimeter. There is only a choice for those people outside of the perimeter of the Hebrews to work for the Hebrews in the land. Until they form another group, they teach another group in the camp, and they themselves, they go out then and they form another holy land. And then if those people outside of the perimeter, they want to be part of this land, they then come to the faith. And then they service the land for them. And then the favors of Yahweh, they come upon the land. It's starting making more sense, doesn't it? So when you then go to these establishments and you hear, oh, if you are obedient to the laws of the land, then God is going to be with you. No, He's not going to be with you. You're not part of the set apart. If you wish to be favored in a land where you work in, work for the Hebrews. And this means in a farm area where they have a camp over there, and then the Hebrews are being obedient to the Torah and the instructions and the prophets and the writings 100%. Then the favor of Yahweh in a natural sense comes then and favors the land. It's the only time people from the outside, Gentiles, can experience the favor of Yahweh in the land. Outside of the perimeter of the farm, there is no favor. So it makes His laws, His statutes, His judgments of the utmost value. That's why we, the Gentiles, we must encourage then the Hebrew brothers to set up camps, buy farmlands, and start then the camp. Start the camps. Because the point is this: they must perfect the second service. The first service was given by Moses. The second service was then implemented by Yahweh Yeshua. There was the first and the second. So begin to understand the layers of understanding from the time that they left Egypt. The church started when they left Egypt. This is what it means. The first service then was placed into practice. Then Yahweh Yeshua came and the second service started. And then a person might even say the second service is because each of the camps then would have a standardized service. So then when we read, for instance, Yehuda, it will be Jude. Yehuda is very interesting reading because it shows a portion of then the people going and establishing the camp. It is truly very interesting because then in a certain point he mentions the situation of Egypt. He makes the reading very interesting because it shows you the understanding ever since the time that they left Egypt. So this line of understanding is absolutely true. So then observe in Yehuda the first chapter. And then Yehuda said, myself wish to remind you, though you know it, that Elohim, after once rescuing the people from Egypt, again destroyed them who did not believe. Why was he bringing these up in a situation that he is stating then regarding the brothers, regarding also the set apart, and part of the faith of the Gentiles, and then later he states of the service. But you, masters, be kind with your servants. What does it mean? Those people, they are working in the land. They are servicing the land for the benefit of the camp. That's why in Yehuda you read it in Egypt. They were on their way to form another holy land. And that's why it came then, for some have obtained entrance who from the start were registered beforehand under this condemnation, wicked men who pervert the grace of Elohim to impurity and deny Him who is the only Elohim of the Mashiach. So it shows you the steps that what is going on. So when you begin to read, you have then the prophetic understanding of the shadow of the time where it came from. So then you are part of the scriptures that you are reading. It shows you what he's saying. In other words, is there are people not invited that were then in the midst of them, and they have demons condemned ever since then the start. He's talking about a spiritual problem. Those that were condemned because they have demons in them, condemned for the end. That's why he brought up Egypt. So why didn't he use another understanding? Because the fact is they were going out forming another camp. Try to understand the concept. And then Shaul then, when he was explaining, because he had the okay from Ruach HaKodesh to be amongst the Gentiles. He was sent with this purpose. The rest of them, they had to be in camps. So then when you read Yehuda, it shows you very plainly. First, then Yehuda is concerned with the set apart people, and then the anointing of the people. The first anointing delivered to the set apart. What was it? Shavuot. Shavuot, then the first understanding from the anointing came through tongues. One of the 7 spirits of Elohim. One of the functions. They began to receive then the functions of Ruach HaKodesh. They became inhabited by Him. And then they did what Yahshua said, or Yahweh Yeshua, going out around the world forming holy lands and shepherding then the Gentiles. That's why then later you read Egypt. But then understand, because when people are not invited to the camp, then they are destroyed. Because they can't maintain themselves amongst the holy people of Yahweh. They have demons in them, then they are cast out. So then when the person begins to read, oh, this is what it means. Yes, this is what it means. This is the church, isn't it? So this is what he's saying. It's a principle given to us, so we understand it from the time of Moses, the church started. This is what he's saying. They are going now to form another church, another camp. But the church camp city, or the churches, camps, cities, must be set apart. So the Gentiles then, they service the perimeter of the land. They experience the favor of Yahweh, and the favor was in Deuteronomy. If they are faithful, then they would experience His favor in the land. They service the land for them. And then Isaiah, the 61st chapter. Then the stranger is not a bad word. He's simply saying the person that is not from the set apart. The Gentiles, though in faith, but being estranged to the covenant, though they were saved by faith, they are not rejected, only pointing out the fact that they would be servicing the land for them. And they, the set apart, would be boasting in Yahweh, not in the Gentiles. The Gentiles are receiving the functions of Ruach HaKodesh through them. So it's starting making more sense, doesn't it? And then later on, he was speaking of then some of the consequences of those people not being invited to the camp, being mixed with them. Then he speaks of then Cain. He speaks then of the wrongdoings of the Korah. Does that start making any sense? He starts then with a word to the set apart, and then he reminds them where they came from. And he points out there are people amongst them, they had entrance over there in the camp and they shouldn't be there. It's not to have company with those people, they have to be set apart. So then, with this concept in mind, each and every area of then Shaliach Shaul and then Shimon have set apart camps, Torah. Then you begin to understand the guidelines. Because when we read the renewed covenant, it is not regarding the Torah. First, it is regarding the guidelines. When we understand the guidelines first and the second service understanding, then we can understand what it does to our faith. Later, we make a reference to the Torah and instructions in the prophets. Otherwise, people are tempted to at the first be compared with the Torah, and it was not meant for them. So the more time goes, the more clearing is done. But then we must be faithful to the Torah of the Gentile. There is the renewed covenant writings. The world and its system is condemned. We are not going to fix this world. We must release ourselves from the world and then be independent upon Yahweh, and He is in the camps. The last standing order from Yahweh Yeshua was for them going around the world forming holy lands. And never, never, never at any point the Gentiles should be shoved with the Torah in their throats. They are to experience the functions of Ruach HaKodesh through the Hebrew people. Set apart, the Creator Himself speaks through them. When they come near the set apart people, comes the holy presence of the Creator. They sense in their spirit there is a link with heaven. Not personal crap from Torah. Try to understand. This is what people are afraid of. They are thinking they are going to be shoved in with Torah in their throats. That's not the point. It's being linked together with heaven. Because heaven understands, then the Gentiles, they have another level of faith. And then it must be given tailor-made. So then they can increase their faith. Would you increase your faith if you are shoved down the Torah in your throat? No, you would repudiate. You'd be defensive. But that's not what the functions are. The functions are for the Gentiles, tailor-made. Each person receives the proper measure. That's why then they are holy and perfect. But it's not for you to amaze yourself, it's for you to increase your faith. So then later when you begin to read the writings of Shaul, it becomes alive. Then you understand what it means. The Torah became alive in your life via faith. Not via demands, but via faith. And then They understand, yes, truly the Torah is active. And the Torah, each of them, they are in the camps. But then they understand their liberty in the faith. They are at liberty in the faith. They are not bound by a damn covenant with Abraham. They are at liberty in the faith. They increase their faiths every time they visit the camp. And you do sense the holy presence of Yahweh when you get near the camp. A tremendous sense of being in the presence of the Creator because comes from it. When Moshe came down from the mountain, he was radiating glory from the Creator. Imagine a group of people then being loyal 100% to the Torah. Boy, people would sense the presence of the Creator from far away. And then they would sound the shofar, and then would come the Shabbat. Then they would sound the shofar of the starting of the Shabbat. And then the Holy Mikras. And then it would make sense, wouldn't it? And then people then around the camp in the nearby cities, they would observe then from the best of their abilities the Holy Mikras or the holy seasons. They would not have to go to Jerusalem anymore. They have representatives of Jerusalem, and it is the camp. They come to the camp for the observance of the Holy Mikras, because there are special words from heaven in each Holy Mikra. Spring feast, autumn feast, they have special words. From heaven, and then the Gentiles, they are part of it. Because understanding from the viewpoint of the Creator. Later in the future, because the population would grow so much, it's not doable for every person in the nations then to come to Jerusalem for the observance of the Holy Mikras, even though He mandated His people, the set-apart people, to observe those. But even if each set-apart person around the world would go to Jerusalem, would it fit? It wouldn't fit. That's why He told them to go around and form holy lands around the world. They would be His representatives to the Gentiles. And then obviously then the Holy Mikras, they would celebrate together as a people around the world, but each in a camp. And then the Gentiles around the camps, they would then come near the camp. They would be participating with them. Not in the camp, but outside of the camp. They would have brothers, they would be spending time with them outside. So truly it is organizing. So then when you read then the Holy Mikras, those are to be absolutely completely done by the set apart people, Hebrews only in their camps. They are obligated to do those. They are under heavenly orders. Those must be done. Not in the level of the Gentiles, but in the level of the set apart. Those must be done. The Gentiles, they don't have any part in it other than when the Holy Mikras they come, the holy festivals, when they come, then they come near the camp. There are brothers outside of the camp, they're waiting for them, and they have special words from heaven regarding the specific season. Because each camp is a representative then of the Holy Land. And then again, it must be very important emphasizing the Gentiles, when they come to the holy festivals, they are never to be shoved Torah down their throats. They are to be given tailor-made words from heaven, and then at the level where they are at. So then the set apart, they have their tasks in their capacity of set apart holy Hebrews. We have our capacity as faithful Goyim, faithful Gentiles. Do we have the obligation of being a part of the holy festivals? It depends upon what is going on in our lives, because we are not bound to them. We show the level of love to our Creator if we do our very best to be in each of those holy mikras. Because when then we receive words from Him, He then takes in consideration our strength and our ability to work out through our problems to be in His presence. As then Cornelius did, didn't he? Cornelius did his very best to be in the presence of Elohim. He was eagerly wanting to be in His presence, and then words from heaven came to him. And at that moment he was the most exciting person on the face of the earth, because he received words from heaven directed to him. So the concept relates with the Gentiles. We should be in His presence, do the best we can to be participating in the holy mikras, because it's fun, it is biblical, it's from the time of Moses. The set apart people are holy, Torah maintained 100%, and there are words from heaven. And the very fact of being part of it then shows then they are practicing the second service. The first service was then observed, the second service then observed and updated, and then the functions of Ruach HaKodesh flowing through the set apart Hebrews for the benefit of the Gentiles. And they can bring their tithes. Once a year they put away 10%, and they come to the autumn feast, they bring their tithes. If they want to have a congregation of their own and rent a building, then they can use their own money, because it's not part of the biblical understanding. It's only a rental of a place for them to come and share their faiths. But no pastors, no teachers, no evangelists, no prophets of their own. They must pay their own price. Though they want to be in the presence of Elohim, they want to be part of the faith, they want to increase their faith, but they do not have upon themselves teachers of their own. That's the price to be paid. If they want to have a teacher, then they request from the camps. Then comes in a highly trained, functioned person that can lead them to pray, lead them to instruction, and then teaches them. Whatsoever is done, let it be done in order. And then after the visit is finished, the set-apart brother returns to the camp. And then the Gentiles resume their work. Does it mean at some point then the Gentiles, if they don't maintain the Shabbat holy, then they're going to die? No, it does not mean they're going to die. Because what did Yahshua say? In this world you are going to have trouble. There are times then a person is involved with so many situations at once, and sometimes a person simply can't do it. Then a person repents of it, and then works the schedule through to make sure the next time they can make it. That's the way it is in the life of the Gentile, or in the lives of the Gentiles. That's the way it is. But they themselves, they take a step further. Then they themselves, they want to change their schedule. They want to try to work it through their problems. So then they get the time available to spend then with the set-apart brothers. And then there they read together the Word, they learn, they receive words of wisdom, knowledge, prophecy, miracles, healings, and so on and so forth. So it's starting making more sense. So then, when you begin to understand the holy festivals, those are truly holy. And then each person participates as he can. Because in the world we are going to have trouble. At times we can't participate in the feasts, we can't be in the Shabbat. It doesn't mean that you are unfaithful. Means the problems of the world then are being worked through until you get a breakthrough in those problems, so then you can participate in the Shabbat. So then regarding tithes, we understand 10%, put it away. 10%, put it away, and then when the autumn feast comes, then you come to the land and you give your tithes. Because there are going to be so many camps around the world that they begin to maintain, that they begin to be obedient. Because the understanding of the tithes, the 10%, was to be given only once a year. Starting making more sense, doesn't it? That's why we should not have pastors, teachers, and then evangelists. Those were concocted. Yahshua said not to have leaders of the Gentiles own lording over each other. This is what he meant. But then we understand that the tithes, those were meant for the set apart. Those were related with the laws. Should the Gentiles then, being part of the faith, give the tithes? Of course. Because it shows them what the Creator means to them. They want to be obedient. So you set apart part of your produce, put it aside. When the time comes, you give it. Because since those laws were given for the set apart, then you yourself, being in a Gentile level of faith, you may decide your own that you want to give part of your 10%, not only in only a day during the year. You may decide to verify what the service area there is requesting. You can use part of your 10% and then verify what is required in the land. Because the 10% per law was regarding the set-apart believers. Are you a set-apart believer? Are you a set-apart Hebrew person? No, you are not a set-apart Hebrew person. You are a Gentile, living by faith. Are you bound by those laws? No, you are not bound by those laws. You are, however, having a task before the renewed covenant. So then Shaul gives us guidelines. So then we use part of it, so then we ourselves can bring balance to our lives. What it would cause then if 150, 200 or more people, 500 people, they give the money at once to a service area? It would be a lot of money coming in at once, wouldn't it? And sometimes during the year then they would not have enough. So then the best is then give once a year. But when there are new camps around, should you wait until the year? No. Then during the time until they are set up and get going, then you give your tithe. Helps the land to get what it must be placed in the land to get the camp going. And there they are. Sometimes they go out in huge groups to farm another holy land. Then they have to find another farm. And then set up camp. And then they have to have animals. They have to have implements. Then they have to work through the land. And there are areas sometimes they don't have enough. But there are brothers over there in the faith that can help. So they can give their 10% until they get going. Then they resume later once a year. Because we are speaking of on the level of Gentiles, not the set apart. The set apart, they have a certain way of doing it, they do it. We Goyim, Gentiles, we are not bound by those. We are by faith. We want to obey them. But then would it be proper then for them to go out, going around the world farming holy lands, and they don't have enough in the land? Would that be proper for you to wait until next year then to give your money? No, you help the land until they get going. And if they want to be particular regarding it, then obviously the Hebrew brothers, that they have trade that they must relieve themselves from, and they must entrust a Gentile faithful person of theirs to do their trade, so that they can evaluate and they make the proper proportions, so then when they go set up another holy land, the whole situation is taken care of. Best yet. But remind yourselves, the set apart, the Hebrew brothers, they are not to be involved in any portion with the trades of the world. So then the service people outside of the camps, they must take care of the whole detail. So then we understand the level of faith, Gentiles, and then the set-apart level, much more stringent, they must be kept in their camps. So then, when nations, they come in cities, and then important authorities, they come and ask and they inquire of Yahweh, they receive words from heaven. And then later they return, it worked. And then comes joy in a camp. And then they would say, what is this kingdom to come is like? Then they point to the east. Go to Jerusalem. This is what it means. And then Jerusalem being then the example of the world. But so far as we can understand and observe, the church factor regarding Jerusalem is absolutely busted, isn't it? There's a lot of work to be done. and then the refurbishment of the Holy Land, and then the church in Jerusalem is going to be then refurbished by the prayer of each camp. Each camp then praying also for Jerusalem to be cleansed and clean. Because the pagans in the land, they must be converted to the Messiah. That's when then Isaiah's prophecy of the first chapter comes to existence. And then the stranger would then service them, and they would boast in Yahweh for the great salvation that came upon the Gentiles. And then the refurbishment of Jerusalem is going to be a lot of it done through those that were against them at first. And they want to do the desire of Elohim. And then those buildings, that junk pagan areas, are going to be cleaned up. That's the great refurbishment that the people are waiting for centuries. And then the third temple is coming up, but only comes when then the second service is perfected. Then Yahweh indicates when the time comes, then it's time to rebuild the temple, then they rebuild the temple. Not until then. The church understanding of the Hebraic line is in shambles. It must be perfected. The third temple won't be rebuilt until then. Because at this very moment, what Israel is wishing is for the third temple to be established, then they would re-establish the first service. Forget it. They are not going to establish the first service, but not in a 1,000 years. The best forget it. The temple won't be rebuilt, not until the second service is perfected. Because only when the second service is perfected, then they would know what to do in a third temple. Because then at some point the tables of stones are going to be shown to the world. And that's the time then when the second service is completed, is perfected, and implemented in a third temple. So then the Hebrews, they must understand there is a church out there that they must perfect. As much as they want the third temple and they love their Creator, they are doing wrong. They must read the renewed covenant and understand what Yahweh Yeshua said to them to do. The lasting standing order from Yahweh Yeshua was for them to go around the world, forming holy lands, and then practice and perfect the second service. And read the Megillah of the Hebrews. Shaul the Shaliach, he knew the Torah, the entire instructions by mouth. Is there any of the Hebrews today that can do it by mouth? The entire instructions he knew by mouth. There is not a Hebrew alive today that can do this. And then he came up with the guidelines of the second service. What are the Hebrews waiting for? They should study the Megillah of the Hebrews and implement the second service and perfect it. So then we begin to understand what's coming in the future. They are not going to rebuild the temple until the second service is perfected, they can forget about it. Yahweh won't let. They're going to be subjected to the Muslims until the second service is perfected. And then the more they wait to release themselves from the trades of the world, the worse the situation gets. So they are going to be cornered by the Muslims, by the nations around them, and then by the Gentiles, because the Gentiles are starting to understanding that the trade are being stolen from their hands. Thou shalt not steal. And then the Gentiles are perceiving, boy, they were stolen from. They can't get their hands on their trades. And they understand that the Hebrews, they should be in their camps, because this was the last standing order. Much more coming up.